Welcome back then folks to, of course, Day 4, the second build of Day 4 in particular of Special Projects Pack number 9, and I know for some of you were curious about what this build was going to be. For those who don't know, Signature is of course my own fictional tuning company in Gran Turismo, think mines, etc. And I build cars that are, above all else, designed to be interesting or fun to drive rather than necessarily the quickest things around. And from what I showcased quite deliberately in the teaser trailer, it seemed that it might be a drift build. Some kind of Porsche Cayman based D1 GP style car, kind of like the Subaru BRZ. So what is this? What's the idea behind it? Because typically my Signature Series cars don't tend to have the most horsepower, yet this one's running a huge amount of power. They don't tend to have a very high point level, yet this one does have a high point level, and they're usually cars which are more about the fun of driving rather than being challenging. So what's with this one? Well, believe it or not, I actually didn't build it to be a drift car. The idea behind this one is so random that I don't think anyone would guess it, but the idea was, I love the engine swap. It's a badass engine to put into a Cayman, and as soon as I used it, it immediately reminded me of something in the Forza series, one of my favourite supercars in the world. It's called the SSC Ultimate Aero, and my idea was, for the Signature build, what if I built an SSC Ultimate Aero that felt like it had been squashed into the Cayman body? So like this top-tier, ridiculously overpowered hypercar, but stuffed into the small, compact frame of a sports coupe. Kind of like a modern-day Shelby Cobra, I guess you could say. The results are pretty fun, to say the least, and believe it or not, we're actually running sports hard tyres with 1400 horsepower, so it's no wonder that it can drift. Now, as far as the parts, as you could tell, it did have the engine swap, so of course you will need to do that. Naturally, as with all of the Signature cars, I have done the livery myself, and of course it has my signature on the car, as with all of them. I'm actually quite proud with this particular design. One of my favourite things about it is having the signature going across the rear window with the two different colours. But in terms of its build, of course, once you've swapped the Maverick engine into it, there's not too much you can do beyond that point. It's already very powerful, up around 1,000 horses. So you want your stage 1 weight. I've left it on sports hards, as I said. As far as the club sports section, we've got the stage 2 weight, the power restrictor and the ballast. For the semi-racing stuff, we've got the silencer already fitted, so don't worry about that. We've actually fitted the racing one. We've got the fully customised computer, the high RPM turbo, the fully customised diff. I haven't bothered with the rigidity, you don't really need it on this one. Stage 3 weight, of course. For the racing stuff, we've got the silencer, naturally. For the brakes, I haven't fitted the racing discs, as you can see here. You probably guessed already, but I went for the carbon ceramics, mostly for the looks. The racing pads, of course, suspension, the race clutch and flywheel, and the transmission as well. As far as the extreme stuff, like I said, we've got the carbon ceramics, the hydraulic handbrake, mostly for drifting and manoeuvrability, and of course the steering angle, mostly actually for the turn-in on corners, but of course it does help with drifting anyway. And then for the ultimate section, there's nothing there anyway. So once you've downloaded the design, of course there's a link in the description for that, and then if you've swapped the engine into it and done the upgrades, now all that remains is to build it. So to jump back into the garage, into the tuning section, as you can see, 1,200 kilos, 1,400 horses, so pretty damn nice power to weight ratio. What's that, about 1,200 horsepower per tonne, something like that, and 750 points, which is pretty nice, and also pretty high for a car on sports tyres. As far as the suspension, we've got a little bit of a difference between the front and the rear, 70 on the front, 80 on the back, 4 on anti-roll, 30 and 40 for the compression and expansion on the dampers, 2.65 on the springs, 3 degrees of camber, so fairly hefty race car style, a little bit of toe on the front with 0.10 and quite a hefty amount on the back with 0.30. For the diff, triple 10, as you can see. Give that a try, see if you like it, and of course you can change it if you don't. As far as the auto setting, pretty stretched out at 480 kilometers an hour. The main reason why I did that is, again, to go back to my reference of the SSC Ultimate Aero, one of the really cool things about driving that car, especially in Forza, is how relentless that surge of acceleration is on that car. When you change gear, it has that little bit of wheel spin initially, but when that thing hooks up, it is gone. The acceleration is ballistic. And I wanted this car to have that feeling, that just rolling on sheer horsepower and torque, and having that longer kind of 5-speed style setup really allows you to have that feeling, and you really can feel it when this thing hooks up. As far as the ballast, I've added 117 kilos, put that all the way to the front, so a little bit more front biased than you'd expect for a Porsche, 52 over the front instead of more mid or rear biased, which of course helps with drifting, and also brings us up to the 1,200 kilo mark. Obviously, the power is untouched in terms of the limiter, We are running quite a bit of downforce. As you can tell, I don't have a huge wing on the back, so it's actually got more downforce on the front than on the rear. Again, very drift-esque. The turbo and everything over here is of course fitted, and now all that remains is of course to jump out to a track, and what better place to showcase a 1400 horsepower car on sports tyres than the Nordschleife, but that is exactly where I took it to show you what it can do. Now, you can see that I am flicking the tail out on this thing all the time, but the really cool part of this is, I often find that when I build a car not for drifting, it ends up being a really controllable drift car, almost as a nice byproduct of that. So much like the SSC Ultimate Aero, you can definitely drift it. It gets the tail out real easy, especially with less weight over the rear and sports tyres. But this is surprisingly forgiving, and that is something which I didn't necessarily expect. Even on sports hards, you can kick the tail out, but then you can hold it, and it will come back into line with a very small blip of the throttle. It's no way near as challenging to drive as you'd think. For a car with this much horsepower, even more so this much torque, it's a ridiculous amount of power to have in such a light, small frame. But even though it's not quite as necessarily quick, I guess you could say, as the Ultimate Aero, I think the Ultimate Aero will probably still be quicker than this were it in the game, it definitely feels, to me at least, to capture that kind of vibe that the Ultimate Aero had in the older Forza games like 3 and 4. To me, it was always one of my favourite cars to drive because it was such a challenging car and yet so rewarding if you got it right. This one is not as challenging and possibly even more rewarding because you can hook up the power surprisingly well. It's so much fun. You can definitely drift it if you want to. So yeah, as far as the signature cars go so far, this is probably the most out there and different compared to the other ones. But I think a lot of you who try this are really going to enjoy it. So if you do decide to use it, I hope of course you have a ton of fun with it. It does have some potential for competition depending on the tyres you use. And of course, check out the other special projects from this week, and we've only got a couple left to do tomorrow, so already we've burned through another week of them, so I hope you've enjoyed them so far, and of course check out the ones that are left, and for now, thanks for watching.